Hello, and welcome to Socially Holistic Podcast. Socially Holistic helps coaches and holistic entrepreneurs and women in heart-centered businesses make sense of social media so they can build their own online network and get more clients. As a heart-centered business owner, you do amazing work. Holly's mission in life is to help you help more people. Help us help more women in business with a 5-star review of this podcast. Please leave one today over at iTunes. The more women who find out about this podcast, the more heart-centered businesses will be successful. Thank you.
Hello and welcome to Socially Holistic Podcast, episode 17. This is your host, Holly Wharton, and I'm here today with our special guest, Peggy Guglielmino from Life Therapy Center. Peggy is an NLP and practitioner and hypnotherapist, and she also works with people using the lightning process. Welcome, Peggy.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you for having me.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about your background? How did you get started in all of this?
Yeah, I have quite eclectic background because I started as a mathematician, and then I went to linguist, and then finally I settled into classical music before I decided it was not my path, and then I decided to train into NLP and hypnotherapy and life coaching completely randomly, simply because I've always been into self-development, and I met the right people at the right time that guided me into that path.
And tell us a little bit about your business journey. How did you get to where you are today with your business?
So I started with the lightning process, as you mentioned, which I'm actually not doing anymore. Okay. I'm just focusing on the NLP hypnotherapy. So as soon as I trained, I did a specialization for the lightning process, which is a tool that works with chronic illnesses. So I did a special course on this, and then I started as a lightning process practitioner. And then after a few years, I decided I wanted to develop more the one-to-one side of it, because that's more what I'm comfortable with. So I did some networking, and then it built little by little, by word of mouth, mainly.
And I think that's really interesting that you say that, because I think so many people that train as life coaches or train as NLP practitioners really, really struggle to build their business and actually get the clients that they need to make a business out of it. So what do you think were the things that you did that helped you become successful?
The first thing I did was networking. So I went to a lot of social networking. There's a website that's called meetup.com that you probably know about. And I joined a lot of groups simply based on my personal interest. And then I just showed up at those groups. Not in the mindset to sell my business, but more in the idea of meeting people. And that's how I got my first clients. And then I also joined a business group called BNI.
Yes.
Which is a networking group that's quite intense. And that got me as well a few clients. And from there, it was simply word of mouth. I think my personal approach is if you do a good job, people will tell their friends, you will attract more clients. Because I think it's important in that line of work that we actually know who we want to work with, rather than taking the yellow pages and calling a therapist out of the blue. People are more trusting and more confident in actually having heard from a therapist through their friends. A recommendation as simple as that.
Yeah, and I think that's why testimonials are so important, and they're so valuable for a website.
Absolutely.
And I think that's really, really interesting what you said about how you went to meetup groups that were things that you had a personal interest in. Because I think so many people get confused about business networking, and they think they have to go and kind of give away as many cards as they can and sell their business to as many people as they can. And it's really just about creating human connections and connecting with people that you feel an affinity with, and you get to know them and they get to know you, and it just kind of flows into possibly a business relationship.
Absolutely. I think I've always thought initially, to be honest with you, I went to my first network groups with my business cards and with the mindset of let me hand out my business card as much as I can. But then one day it didn't really work, obviously. And then one day I thought, okay, let me imagine if I am in those shoes, in the shoes of the people I'm handing the business card to, what do I look like? And I went I look like someone who's only interested in giving my business card in business.
Yes.
Someone who wants to make money, but not really someone I would want to work on a human level. And that's when I changed. That's when I thought, it's better to build a human relationship, as you said, and then build that trust and that natural connection, that natural rapport that will lead later into potentially a business association, I would say. rather than trying to push it, because I don't believe in hard sales personally.
Yeah.
So
especially for a heart-centered business, they absolutely have to
Exactly.
connect with you.
Absolutely.
I was actually just reading this morning on a forum about this woman who had just recovered some past traumatic issues, and she went to a therapist and she just felt that person was not right for her, and then she went to another one and she felt that person didn't get her, and she was feeling really, really frustrated because she was just saying, is there anyone that's right out there for me?
Yeah.
And of course, it's just kind of the little path that you have to go down to find the right person to work with for you.
Absolutely. And I also believe that as a therapist or as a coach, you can't work with everyone. I think you're told out there that, yes, you just build rapport and you can work with anyone. But I believe that the rapport, the natural rapport, the relationship, the connection you have with that person, the genuine, authentic connection is the most important thing. Now, in our social lives, we don't get on with everyone. And I think it's the same professionally. We don't get on with everyone. There are some people with who it won't work, and that's okay.
Yeah, I agree. And I think some people are so desperate at the beginning to build a business that they kind of force themselves into relationships with clients that perhaps aren't their ideal client.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's understandable, because when you begin, you want to make money, you want to build your client base. But I think it's a question of experience as well, and it's accepting that sometimes people won't be right for you and you won't be right for them, and that's okay.
And you're also going to get the best testimonials and best recommendations from people that are your ideal client.
Yeah, because in my experience, people that I did take on, even though we didn't have that initial connection, it didn't work anyway. So, at the end of the day, you shoot yourself in the foot because they leave not being satisfied.
Yeah.
And
it's just a waste of your time and theirs.
Absolutely.
So what are some of the biggest challenges that you've had to overcome in building your business?
So the biggest one was a few years ago when the crunch happened, the credit crunch happened. And suddenly, because I was working a lot in Norway when I was doing the lightning process, so I was running courses to help people with chronic illnesses. And exactly at that time, there was a credit crunch. And at the same time, there were a lot of Norwegian practitioners that got their diploma, which means they didn't need any English-speaking practitioners in Norway. So I found myself working like crazy in Norway, every week being in Norway to work, to suddenly having no work. For 6 months. I didn't have a client. And that was very scary. That was very scary, because obviously you always have the concern and the worry, am I going to be able to pay the bill? And I would say the biggest challenge was to be in that phase where I had to start from scratch again after a few years of being successful and earning quite a lot of money, suddenly back to nothing. And it was quite stressful, obviously. And so I would say that's the biggest challenge.
And what do you think helped you come out of that?
I think my mindset was the first thing. Not for 1 second did I think, okay, I can't do this, let me revert to music, for example. I thought, I will make it, and failure or giving up was not an option. So I never thought of this. I just thought, my mindset was, what can I do? What's my next step? What can I do? And that's when I joined the network groups. And I remember having a conversation with my best friend at the time, because BNI is very early in the morning because of the breakfast. And I'm not a morning person. And I remember speaking to my best friend at that time and say, oh yeah, I've seen that network group. But it's like 30 in the morning, so I don't think I'm going to go. And she said to me, you know what, you haven't been working for 4 months. You get your ass down there and you do some networking at 6:30 in the morning. And that was the best advice, because at the end of the day, it's do what it takes.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Even if it's getting very far out of your comfort zone, and if it's doing things you don't want to do, that's what helps. And the idea of I cannot fail, it will happen, is the driver behind it.
Yeah. And I think that's interesting what you say about doing what it takes, even if it takes you outside of your comfort zone. I feel like I have this conversation so often with women in business, that being in business and being a solopreneur really brings up your stuff,
Absolutely.
Personal stuff, and it helps you break out of your comfort zone in so many ways.
Yeah. And it's quite difficult, because you're completely right. It brings up your stuff, all your insecurities, your confidence issues, your self-esteem issues. Can I do this? I'm not good enough. And all this comes up when you have to get out of your comfort zone. But the beauty of this is when you address it, you become such a different person at the end of it. And the journey is amazing. You completely change who you are, because you're forced to get rid of your limitations.
Yes. Makes you so much stronger. Another thing that I love what you just said was that you didn't want to fall back on music. Now, I know that you've trained as a classical musician and you're a harpist, And I find it so interesting because so many of the women that I meet that are in heart-centered businesses are actually multi-passionists. And so they're either musicians kind of on the side, or they're artists, or they sing, or something. So tell us a little bit about that and how you kind of weave that into your life.
I've been playing music since I was 4. So it's completely part of who I am. And a lot of the time, people ask me how I combine music and therapy. And the obvious is to do music therapy, but I don't. And I've been thinking about that for quite a while because I'm not really aware of how I include it. Consciously, what I do is I play hard for myself now as a way to unwind, to relax, to get in touch with my creativity. But what I've also noticed is unconsciously what's going on is the sensitivity that I developed out of, playing music for all my life appears in the work I do with clients, because the sensitivity, this very high perceptions to little details, to micro movement, to micro changes, comes from the sensitivity I have in music. And also the fact that I do something on the side which is artistic and is really in tune with the feminine side and the sensitivity, really helps to understand what people go through, because it gives you an empathy, a compassion that's very useful, obviously. And when you're a woman in business, you have to be strong and you have to be determined and you have to work hard, and your masculine side comes out. So it's a very good balance to combine the two.
I love that. I love what you said about how the attention to detail in music helps you with your clients. I think that's fascinating.
Yeah. It's also a sensitivity. It's very hard to describe, but when you are playing music or when you're an artist, you have to develop an intuition in terms of a feeling of what feels right, what doesn't feel right. And that ability, this intuition, this receptivity, this perceptivity is extremely useful when you work with clients, because that's what allows you to spot the little tiny mini changes. Even if they are not concrete, you get a sense of what's going on. And that intuition, I would call it, is extremely useful when working in a human field.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. So what kinds of issues do clients tend to bring to the table with you? Are there any similar things that keep coming up over and over again, or do you just treat a wide range of issues?
I treat a wide range of issues. So typically weight loss, stop smoking, phobia, and this kind of issues, or fear of public speaking, this kind of things. But what I've noticed is at the end of the day, no matter what issues people bring to the table, it always is down to self-esteem. It's always down to self-confidence, self-love, self-acceptance, and self-esteem. So in a way, yes, I keep having the same type of issues, but they manifest themselves in a different way. I have people who come to see me for relationship issues, for even weight loss, phobia, issues that you wouldn't think are necessarily linked with self-esteem come down to this. So it's very interesting.
Funny how that comes up in so many different ways, isn't it?
Totally.
So what would you say are your top tips for someone who is struggling with self-esteem? What are the best ways for them to get help and to work on that issue?
I think the first thing is to understand that you live with yourself 24/7. Yes. And at the end of the day, if you don't accept yourself unconditionally, and what I mean by that is able to go, you know what, I have this weakness, I have this fear, I have this pattern, I'm messy, I'm lazy. And you go, but that's okay, with a very compassionate way towards yourself. You're never going to attract that from other people. And that's always going to be an inner weakness, because if you live 24/7 with someone that criticizes you or doesn't like what you do or what you are, you're always going to feel vulnerable and have issues. And I think the first thing to understand is self-acceptance. The genuine, unconditional self-acceptance is the core for self-esteem.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very good point.
And I also think, a lot of self-esteem issues come from having this inner voice. We all talk to ourselves. And our inner voice, most of the time, is so critical. It's so nasty. And it's about learning that we don't need to talk to ourselves in that way. Again, you're 24/7 with that voice. Yeah. Imagine if you live 24/7 with someone that tells you that you're not good enough and you're fat and you're ugly. How is that going to make you feel? So it's all about being aware of that voice and changing it, learning to transform it into something and someone that's much more caring and accepting.
Very, very good point. So do you have any recommendations for people that perhaps are interested in seeing a hypnotherapist or an NLP practitioner, but they're not sure if it's the right kind of technique for them?
I think my first advice, and this is very important, is you need to look at what kind of training they've done, because unfortunately this is not yet a regulated field. Some people do 2 weeks of training and bam, they awarded the title of NLP practitioner or hypnotherapist. Now, if they have a therapy background, that's okay, because then they're simply using a new tool.
Right.
But if they don't have a therapy background, doing 2 weeks of training and then calling yourself a therapist or a practitioner is quite dangerous, because actually you don't have the experience to deal with therapy.
Yes.
So I would say if you think of going and see a hypnotherapist or an NLP practitioner, you need to make sure, number one, how long was their training? And it needs to be a minimum of a year, because otherwise, again, if they don't have any background.
Yeah.
And number two, how many years have they been practicing?
Yeah.
And how much experience they have, because it's very, very important. I've seen some clients being traumatized by their therapist because their therapist didn't have the skills, the therapeutic skills. I'm not talking about tools like NLP or EFT or anything. I'm talking about skills that didn't have the therapeutic skills to handle issues. And even if you go to see, say an NLP practitioner because you want to stop smoking, it seems like you're not going to go in depth into your issues. But actually, there are underlying causes most of the time. And if they come up and the person you're working with can't handle them, that's when you're not safe anymore. So I would say that's the first thing is to check. And in terms of, is it something for you or not, I would simply give it a try, because there's no way to know until you try it if it's the right thing. Also, I would go to someone who has different tools. So someone who does coaching, NLP, hypnotherapy, CBT, EFT, because then if NLP, say, is not the right thing for you, they can use another tool.
Yeah.
So...
Yeah, it could be that the therapist is the right therapist for you, but if they don't have the right tool for you, it may still not be a good fit. So the more tools they have in their toolbox, the better.
Yeah. But absolutely. However, the most important thing is to feel that it's the right person for you.
Yes.
Because that's what's going to make the most difference.
Yes, I agree. And I think that's sometimes the hardest part, is finding that person that you connect with.
Yeah, and it takes a while. I mean, I remember back then, because of course I'm doing therapy on myself, otherwise I wouldn't be very congruent. I was looking for EMDR therapists because I was interested in EMDR. And it took me ages to find the right person. So to call them and on the phone, notice if I had a good feel or not, then going to the first session, notice if there was this connection. And it took me, I don't know how many months to find the right person. But at the end of the day, it's like when you're looking for a house, you're not going to just buy the first house, you're going to do some research.
Yeah.
And we're talking about your well-being and your mental health, so it's worth taking the time.
I think that's a really good point. I think sometimes the process of actually finding the right therapist for you can be a journey in itself.
Absolutely. I completely agree.
So one other thing I want to ask you about, you have been working also as a trainer for NLP and hypnotherapy, and you're about to set up your own new training school.
Absolutely.
Tell us a little bit about that, please.
So I've been training NLP and hypnotherapy for a few years now in 2 different companies. And the thing I cherish the most is the fact that it takes time to train.
Yeah.
And there are too many courses out there that are fast track, which is good because you learn very fast. But at the end of the day, you come out of it not knowing how to use the tools.
Yeah.
And my approach is very different. I don't care about doing 2 weeks and then get a lot of money by doing courses every month. I care about the result, because I really want to make sure that the situations I've seen with my clients that go to see a therapist and get traumatized by them doesn't happen anymore, because as a patient, it's the worst thing that can happen. So that's my little idealistic approach, is I want to make sure people know what they're doing. So I've decided now to go independent and do my own school, because I've always been a freelance and I find it difficult to work for other people. So I'm setting my own school, and I'm going to continue to train NLP practitioner courses, which is over 6 months. And I'm also, so the practitioner course is very typical NLP hypnotherapy training, as in it teaches all the main processes that are needed when you want to be a practitioner and a hypnotherapist. And then I'm doing a master course, which is much more orientated towards what I'm doing. It's much more therapeutic orientated rather than business. A lot of NLP masters courses out there are very business oriented. Mine is much more therapy, looking at main issues people bring up, how to handle them. So it's really the therapeutic side of it, and also addressing specialities such as chronic illnesses, codependency, confidence and self-esteem, all this kind of things. So I'm very excited about that.
Good. And do you require case studies from your students or a certain number of hours that they need to actually be practicing with clients?
So the reason I do it over 6 months is I give them time in between the weekends to practice on real clients, and then we have mentoring calls where they can talk to me about their real practice, and I can give them advice and help them out with that. And yes, the requirements are they need to do 30 hours of practice before graduating. They need to do case studies, to read some books, do some book reviews, to do a little essay on a specific topic, and then to do a session with a client. So I really make sure they have the solid background to become therapists.
I really, really like that approach, because I think so many NLP practitioner training courses, you just go, you study, you practice within the classroom, but then you don't actually get to practice with real clients or practice clients. And so you just, you get your diploma, but you don't really have the skills that you need to actually start using it professionally.
Exactly, because it's very different to practice in the classroom with people who know the processes, and they're going to help you unconsciously or consciously with the process, and being with a real client who has got no idea and most of the time has got unconscious patterns that are hidden and jump out during the session. It's a very different approach, and I think it's important that as a trainer, I'm a practitioner as well. There's so many people that do their NLP practitioner training, then they do the masters, and then they become trainers without actually applying those tools in real life. And that's why I really want my masters to be different, because it's all about, okay, let me teach you what I've learned in the experience of working in the field rather than just a theory. It's very important.
Yeah, and I think that's huge for people that actually want to apply those skills to working with people. I mean, they need to train with someone who is using those skills on a daily basis with clients.
Absolutely. It's very important. Because at the end of the day, it's all about the client's safety, It's not about us making money, or it's not about us having our diploma as fast as possible. It's about if you want to be successful as doing this job, you need to be good, and the only way to be good is to keep your client safe and knowing what you're doing, and that can't come just from a theory.
Exactly, and it's all about keeping those clients feeling safe, as you say, and comfortable. And in hypnotherapy and NLP, you're kind of delving deeper than you would, say, with counseling, perhaps.
Yeah.
It's like you're getting into the deeper issues, and so they really, really need to have that feeling of safety.
Yeah, because you're working with the unconscious mind, and our unconscious mind controls 95% of our lives. So if you have an issue that's hidden in the unconscious mind and it comes out during the session, as it does when you work with hypnotherapy or NLP, you need to feel safe that your therapist is going to be able to handle it. And I've been, as a patient, I've been in a situation where something came up from my unconscious mind, something a bit traumatic, and the therapist didn't know how to handle this. And I would never want any of my clients to feel this way, or any of my students' clients to feel this way. This is horrible.
Yeah, I agree. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us about your business, or about how you work with people, or your training?
I think the way I work with people is I take a lot of time to understand who they are, and I never apply old-made processes. So even though they are old-made processes within NLP, I always use flexibility to combine different processes according to what the client needs.
Yes.
Because no client will exactly fit the step-by-step process you have in your manual. So it has to be the other way around. You have to look at the client, understand what they need, and then from there choose which step of which process to apply. And flexibility is very, very important.
And I think that's one of the things that comes with experience too, because
Absolutely.
I mean, I know from experience, having trained as a coach, the first few practice sessions, it was like, oh, this doesn't fit the book. What do I do? And you've just got to learn to kind of trust and...
Yeah. And it's practice and experience.
Yes.
Absolutely.
That's so important. Quick question. Do you happen to have any women business mentors, or are there any women in business who inspire you?
I don't have any mentors, but there's a couple of women that I really admire. The first one is Louise Hay, because of how she stays human, even though she's in business and even though she is making business. There's a humanity that stays there that I appreciate. And the second one is Brandon Mays. I don't know if you know her.
No.
She's written a journey. So she's a NLP practitioner, hypnotherapist. She worked with Tony Robbins.
Oh, okay.
And she's mainly working with illnesses and health. And it's the same. She is making a lot of money. She is very, very successful. But there's a humanity within her that I really appreciate, because a lot of the time when you look in business, people in business, when they just start, they're still human. And then at some point, money corrupts them and they lose their humanity. They become sharks. You know, a lot of business people become sharks. And in that field, this is the worst thing you can do. So I like both of them for keeping in touch with their human side, for staying grounded despite being so successful.
And keeping it heart-centered rather than kind of money-focused.
That's it, absolutely.
Good. Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
I'm going to include your links to your website and everything in the show notes, but I'd like you to just mention, where can people find you online?
I think so my website is lifetherapycenter.com, but I'm about to rebrand it. So yes, I know it doesn't look updated, but probably the easiest is either to connect with me on LinkedIn, and also Facebook or Twitter. It's probably the easiest one. Or even easier, if we come back to basics, people can email me or even call me. So my email is peggy@lifetherapycenter.com. And my phone number is 079-6462-7621.
Perfect. And that's in the UK. Excellent.
It's in the UK.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. It was so lovely to talk to you about your business journey and what you do. And obviously, I will mention this in the show notes, but I've worked with Peggy and I absolutely loved my experience. And that's why I invited her to be a guest here today, because I love the work that she does. And I think she does a great job.
Thank you very much, Holly.
All right.
Very kind of you.
Thank you. And thank you for listening. And remember to visit sociallyholistic.com/SHP17 for the show notes on this episode. Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening to the Socially Holistic Podcast with your host, Holly Wharton. Please help us help more women in business by giving us a 5-star review of this podcast. The more women who find out about this podcast, the more successful businesses there will be. So please leave a 5-star review today over at iTunes. Thank you.